Welcome everyone to the Keys to Home Buying podcast, where home buyers of all kinds come to learn the ins and outs of buying a home from industry insiders who know it best. I'm your host, Justin Mead, mortgage loan officer, and with me today is Connor Johnson, Realtor with Livian Vermont. Welcome, Connor. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate being here.
Really excited to have you. You and I have obviously done a lot of work together. Yeah. You're my first podcast interviewee.
When this blows up, I'll always be the first one.
Love it. So we're just going to roll with the punches on this one and see where it goes. But I do want to give you a proper intro. So for the people at home, give a little insights to pretty much your professionalism, because I really like working with you, and the proof is in the pudding when it comes to experience, right? So you've been doing this for 4 years now. You have 117 lifetime transactions for roughly 53 million, which a lot of people don't realize that is above average, I would say. You also recently got engaged to Kendra.
I did.
Who I helped you guys buy your houses.
Yep.
And she's amazing. So go you. You guys are actually getting married at the same venue that we got.
Correct. Married. Yeah. In September, we're getting
that is
top
awesome.
in.
Man, that place is great.
Can't say the date or when people crash into it.
Right? September, 3 years from now. Okay. That's what everyone needs to know. And you have a good mix of clientele. So first-time home buyers, families doing their size up or right sizing, I've heard it referred to a lot.
Yep.
And a mix of a few repeat investor clients. So good. You work with pretty much anybody.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, I don't definitely don't discriminate against buyers. Especially in this market, there's something out there for everybody. So.
Yep. So let's start there. This market. I mean, everybody that I've talked to in the industry, obviously, is this market's crazy.
Yep.
All buyers I talk to, this market's crazy. I'm gonna wait until it settles down. Are you hearing the same thing, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely all hear the same thing. One of the biggest pieces is, people were saying that in 2022, 2020 as well.
Yep.
And with that, I mean, the people that bought in 2020 are very happy that they did. The people that sat on the sidelines and waited until 2023, well, you lost out on some appreciation there at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of conflicting reports right now. The national media is saying, housing home prices are going down. They're on the decline. That is absolutely true in a lot of places in the country. All the national news comes from the larger national markets, and there is minus signs in front of a lot of their appreciation values. In Vermont and Chittenden County in particular, that is not the case. We see, every day there's just no inventory here, and there's still a pretty darn high buyer demand. Yeah. So a lot of what you're seeing on the national media is definitely happening in places. It's just not happening in Vermont. So, while it has cooled off a little bit to an extent, you're still seeing appreciation values with a positive in front of them. What used to be, let's say, 15 or 20% year over year, which is a pretty unhealthy amount there for a couple of years.
It felt pretty healthy to me.
Yeah.
I was pretty happy in my house.
As a homeowner, everybody was happy. But, for buyers, it was a pretty crazy jump there for a couple of years. So when it pulls back down to 2 to 4 or 5%, it feels like it's way different than it was, and it is, but it's still moving in the right direction. And if anything, in my opinion, it's moving in a more healthy direction. If it continues on this way, it's a little bit more sustainable than 40% in 2 years, for instance.
Yeah. No, agreed. You made a lot of good points there. And like you said, the national media obviously, I think media in general, there's no whole argument there, but good consensus is that they're trying to sell time, and then fear creates viewers. So they're going to focus on the negative. And there's pockets throughout the country that might see some depreciation.
Sure.
I think what's confused a lot of my buyers, and maybe you can talk to this, is we're seeing finally some price reductions, which was unheard of the last 2 or 3 years since COVID, right? Everything's just been going up or offering way over.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing some price lowering. Reductions. Thank you. I just completely lost the word there, even though I just said it. And people mistake that for depreciation when in reality, it's probably that they were just overlisted to begin with. Yeah. And now the market is telling them like, well, no, it's actually here.
Yeah. And not to dive too deep into that, specific piece, I draw it out on a map, sort of a bar graph or some sort of line graph every time I have a buyer consultation, for instance,
Yep.
just to explain what's going on. The price reduction piece is absolutely a real thing, even in Chittenden County or Vermont. Chittenden County is still moving very fast, but in Vermont per se, it definitely is still happening. Typically, what you're seeing with price reductions is those are the homes that price themselves as if the 15 to 20% appreciation values continued.
Yep.
They're pricing themselves egregiously high over what was already taking place. Instead of pricing it appropriately to the market, of normal appreciation gains. If they price it correctly, then that's when you start still seeing multiple offers and very competitive situations. And then if you price it way over what's realistic, then that's where you're starting to see some pullback and starting to see some reductions, which again is sort of a more healthy way to do real estate.
Sure.
So
yeah, it's kind of bring everything back to where it should.
Exactly.
Yep. Now, is there what's the drawback as a home seller to doing a price reduction?
I mean, as a home seller, the days on market is ultimately the enemy of your home's value. So one of the first questions that every home buyer asks when they're walking through your house is to their agent, how many days has this been on the market?
Yep.
It used to be if it was under 30, then that was a pretty low time frame. Now, if it hits double digits, that's a long time.
10 days.
Yeah, exactly. So ultimately, if you get through that first 14, 21 days or so and you don't have any offers, especially if you've had some showings, it's a good indication that the market at that point and all the buyers in it have rejected your price. Typically, what we see is if you can get multiple offers or if you can price the home well to start, you have a lot more enjoyable process, both from the value that you get in the home and then also the terms. People get too wrapped up, and rightfully so, in the top number that's on the contract. That top number on the contract is only good if you can get to a closing table. If there is 13 terms to get through before then, then at that point, it's harder to actually get that money out of the property. If you have multiple offer situation and you price it right or you price it just under market value, the market's always going to drive it back up, which is what you see in multiple offers. But as well, with multiple offers, you see better terms, which is just more guaranteed for a seller to get to the closing table ultimately. So
sure. Yeah. So let's shift a little bit to buyers, because I think a lot of the people listening would be first-time home buyers.
Awesome.
So I know you mentioned you have like a kind of intro. Is it a presentation? Kind of like a come on in. I'm Connor. This is how
here's the
I work.
roadmap.
And here's how the process works. So what's some of like the key takeaways of that conversation? Obviously, you don't have to do the whole thing.
Certainly.
But what are like the key points that if someone was elevator pitch, what do I have to know going into this?
Yeah, I would say the biggest pieces, and we can break it down, not to run through the whole thing, but the expectations piece is what I found to be the most important thing. If people are getting into a process where they know what to expect, then it typically goes so much smoother just because everyone's on the same page, especially with a first-time home buyer. This is the first time they're doing this. If anything, it's more important for them to have an accurate roadmap than anyone else, just because they don't have that prior experience. I don't know about you, but for myself, I don't love not being in control or know what's going on. So if you can have really the expectations on the forefront of things like timeline. So for instance, from accepted offer to closing, if you have a loan, it's 45 to 60 days on average in Vermont. You might be able to push it a little bit, but with appraisers and things that play into that, that you're looking at 45 to 60 days. So budget for that time frame. Budget for me conveying some pricing work to you when we're talking about writing an offer. Also let's get all your schedules out. So, is Tuesday your best day for showings? Is it Saturday? Really just ensuring that I'm doing a good job for my clients, and then also they know what's going on through the process. Oftentimes that leads to some really great questions that aren't necessarily part of the roadmap, but it helps me learn about them and it helps them feel comfortable in the process. So that initial consultation is very important, and I really try to not skip
it. Anyone listening, I would recommend absolutely taking advantage. I kind of have a similar thing. I want to talk to people ahead of actually pre-approving them, so that I know them and they know what to expect. And setting expectations, that's got to be number one for everyone in our industry, because everyone's talking to their mom, their dad, their brother, their sister, their best friend who bought, and they're going to tell them how their experience was, that then just makes an assumption that that's how it always works.
Correct.
And really, I think it's different every time.
Agreed. And different every time and different in every market too. I mean, oftentimes that's one thing we hear all the time. My mom and dad bought a property and we talked to them, and that's awesome. I entirely understand that thought process. I had the same thing when I bought my first property.
Yeah.
At the same
mom and
time,
dad know more than me.
Exactly. Yes. It is very, what happened in how real estate was transacted in 2012 is a lot different than how it is or was in 2022 and heading into 2023. So just knowing the ins and outs of the market that you're heading into, really the only way that I found that you can do that is sitting down with somebody who's actively in the market. That's why I think that does provide so much value just from an expectation standpoint.
Yep. Agreed. So in today's market, someone comes to you, they do the first consult. What are you telling them? I know you're telling them about 45 to 60 days to close once they have their offer accepted.
Yep.
What are you telling them for time searching? Is that the name of that term, by the way?
Time spent searching for your home.
Yeah.
I would say that it very much, what comes into play there is how serious we are right from the start is one. Do we have all of our ducks in a row yet, or don't we? For instance, we can't write an offer on a property without a pre-approval letter. Whether you're the only offer in or not, the seller needs to see that. So are you pre-approved? If you are, awesome. And then that is a bit of a double-edged sword type question. There's people out there that, go out, they see one house, they absolutely fall in love with it, and they'll do anything it takes to get it. And there's folks that it takes them 6 months of, looking, and, neither one is right or wrong. Oftentimes it depends on what you're looking for. I mean, if you're looking for a $400,000 single family in Chittenden County that's upgraded, there's a lot of people looking for that too. Yeah. So we'll be competing against others. So, the expectation is that might take a little bit longer, in order to get that. If you're a little bit more flexible, in terms of what you're looking for, and you're a little bit more malleable in terms of finishes, or, you're willing to do a little bit of work, stuff like that, then, it can be shorten the time frame a little bit. But it's a tough question to answer because it's anywhere between a week and
3 years.
Yeah, 6 months. So
I think it took my wife and I 3 years to find our house.
Well, you are not the ideal client.
Some of the pickiest buyers out there.
Yeah, that relates back to it too. I mean, some clients, they can walk into something and say, hey, we can change this, and that's awesome. And they might be able to, get under contract and get into something sooner than somebody that, is walking away because they don't like how the doorbell sounds. Yep. So something like that, little things. If somebody's very picky about little things, and it's going to take a little bit longer, ultimately the price point is one of the biggest pieces as well. Yep. It allows you to be a little bit more flexible the higher price point you have. And obviously a lot of first-time home buyers, rightfully so, don't have a incredibly high budget. Sure. So it really pushes a lot of first-time home buyers towards the same properties. And at that point, it's a matter of who's better prepared to win, and then who's also more willing to win.
Sure. Now, do you see a lot of people hesitate to offer more?
In 2020, we did. When it was new-ish.
Yeah.
To
that was kind of the start of going crazy amounts higher.
Yeah. Now it's a little bit more common. It's not as many people push back against it, for instance. At the same time, the best way that I can put it is, a well-priced home is oftentimes a little bit below the market value. So just disconnecting the home's value with what the asking price says on Zillow or Trulia or Realtor.com. Ultimately, that number is just something that the seller and the listing agent came up with and put it on there. There's a lot of different strategies around asking price. If there's feeding frenzy, there's fair market value, there's needle in the haystack, which is you go way over and just hope a cash buyer comes in. Those are the ones that ultimately usually get price reductions.
They come way back down.
But there's a lot of different ways to look at what a listing price means. And with that, if it's priced really well and it's priced low, then you can feel good about going 25,000 over if that brings it back up to the market value. Right. It's going to get driven there anyways. So.
Yep. So of your buyers, I know you do a lot of new builds as well. Percentage wise, how many of the first timers are going new build versus already existing?
So a very small percentage hopping right into new builds right off the bat. It happens. It's just not as common. New builds is really, I would say, most common in that, you own a condo or a smaller single family home. You had a couple kids, it gets small. Now you're sizing up into the new build. So that's what we see most often with the new builds is, in their 30s or so, roughly speaking. I would say if we had to overgeneralize it. And then, people in their younger 30s or 20s or just the average first-time home buyer, that's typically not new construction just because it's like buying a new car. Like you're paying a premium for the fact that nobody else has been in there before. And with that, it's typically, especially in Chittenden County, comes a pretty significant cost increase.
Yeah. So timeline on a build, I know that's probably a loaded question. But I think that can be like anywhere from 6 months to a couple of years. And what usually gets in the way? What usually slows things down?
Construction in general is a tricky one. I would say that for the average, when you break down new construction, you have to do it in two ways. One is spec or production style build. That means you're not fully designing every aspect of the home. You're not going
like you being the buyer.
The buyer, yes, sorry. You're not going in and changing things after they're already done, which takes up a lot of time. And that's the production style spec type build. That's a lot of what you see marketed on like the MLS, for instance. In the new construction realm, there's also fully custom luxury type builds. Those take a little bit longer just because every single thing needs to be designed.
Right.
The architects take 2 months. The build takes longer just because, the builders have never built that house before. So it takes a little bit longer there. I would say, the average would be 6 to 8 months for a production style. And I would budget 9 to 10 for a little bit more custom of a home.
Sure. So break down, like how many times do people go to the production style versus completely custom? Are most just doing the production site build?
Entirely, yes. Most are, and it's typically price point related. Of course, with entirely custom homes, it comes with a higher price. You're looping in architects, you're looping in. Typically, that's a little bit more luxury in terms of new construction. Now, when I say luxury, I'm not saying that spec homes aren't oftentimes very luxurious and very, very nice. It's just, with the fact that you're not touching every single aspect of the house, builders are typically able to keep those prices a little bit lower, which just means more people can buy them. So I would say majority of people go towards the production style spec builds, one from a timeline piece, it's a little bit faster. And then two, just from a more affordable piece. Now, new construction in Chittenden County is still very expensive. But, you're talking a significant decrease in cost if it's not, you buy a lot, you bring in a builder and you build a custom home. So,
But then on the same note, you could go nuts in the production style.
You certainly can.
And all of a sudden add all these finishes and you
Correct.
could change, you still could kind of change every detail if you wanted to.
Yeah, you're not changing necessarily the frame of the house per se,
not the layout or anything.
You still do pick, flooring.
I do want that crown molding.
Correct.
I do want the really nice hardwood.
Yeah, I want quartz, not granite countertops, stuff like that. You can upgrade, and those upgrades do add up pretty quick. That is, a lot of buyers like to be able to put their fingerprints on the home that they're building, even if it is a more production style. So with that, there oftentimes are some upgrade costs past, the contract price. At the same time, I've seen people just say, hey, this is included. Awesome. Build it. And they're happy to claim too.
Move on.
It really is just buyer preference at that point.
Nice. So shifting gears, territory-wise, is there a certain area that you typically stick to where you work with people?
I would say if you looked at majority of my business, it would be in Chittenden County. Franklin County's in there too. If you had to draw a circle, it's from like Swanton down to Middlebury and over to Montpelier, and then obviously not into New York. So the lake would be the determining factor on that side.
But that's a good point. So are you only licensed in Vermont?
I currently am only licensed in Vermont. Yes. Okay. Yep. So I sell Vermont real estate. I can be anywhere within the state. At the same time, I typically try to stay within I would say roughly speaking, an hour range of Burlington.
So in that range, are there any markets right now that you would consider up and coming that maybe people hadn't considered in the past?
Yeah, you have, the up and coming markets are very much identified at this point.
Okay.
Fairfax is a great example of one. St. Albans, especially town, is another example of one. That's where you're actually starting to see, or you very much are seeing. There's actually a good amount of new builds in places like that, just because the land is a little bit more affordable. People are able to get into a single family home, a little bit cheaper than they would in South Burlington, for instance. So that I would say the peripheral around Chittenden County is definitely where the most, I would say, bang for your buck happens if you still want to stay in the general Burlington type area of Chittenden County.
Yep. So Franklin, pretty much Franklin County is kind of.
Yeah, I mean, Franklin County is relative too. You can go all the way up to Richford, and I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the same as Fairfax. That's in Franklin as well.
Okay.
If you're up touching the Canadian border, that's a lot different market per se than Fairfax, which is just outside of the Chittenden County realm. So Chittenden County is where the most populated area of Vermont is.
Yep.
So the closer that you stay to that, yes, the prices also go up, but there's also typically more home value in that as well.
Yep. So in terms of your team you're on, explain the structure. How does that all work?
Yeah, so I work, I'm a Livian Vermont agent. Livian is, I picture in terms of umbrellas. There's Keller Williams, which is the overarching national umbrella, Keller Williams Real Estate. It's the largest brokerage in the world. Within that, it used to just be a bunch of single agents that were all sort of working for themselves. And then about 10 years ago, sort of spearheaded by Adam Hergenrother, who's, of course, out of Vermont. He started the Livian team, at the time Hergenrother Real Estate. But it's just a way that it's more strated off in a sense. So there's 10 agents on my team. We all work underneath the Livian Vermont logo. With that, it's nice. It comes with, we have 2 full-time transaction coordinators who are dedicated strictly towards the client experience.
That's Ashley and Lauren.
Ashley and Lauren, for instance. So they're dedicated just towards that. We have an entire marketing team. We have an entire training organization and coaching organization and things along those lines. So it's really just allowed, it's almost like a mini brokerage inside of a brokerage. So it provides a lot more value than what a single agent necessarily would be able to, just in terms of a marketing piece and a systems that are in place piece, because the average single agent is not going to have 2 people that are solely responsible for the client experience throughout the transaction, or an entire marketing team, or things along those lines. So it's allowed a lot more agents to benefit from things like that, and ultimately, in my opinion, sell real estate at a little bit higher level.
Nice. And then from like a buyer's perspective, working with Livian, excuse me, benefit versus working with like a solo agent.
I would say on the buy side, outside of, there's not too much difference on the buy side, outside of the fact that you're working with agents that have, Ashley and Lauren are still there, and then also just the coaching and training, education type side of it. You're working with 10 agents that are all actively in real estate. At the end of the day, majority of I think the average agent sells 3 to 4 homes a year, and that just counts a lot of people that do it part time. If you're working with a living agent, then we're all full time agents that are actively in the market. So I would say that the experience piece is one thing that's pretty crucial, and to build off of experience doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, anyways, and it's convenient for me to say this, but experience doesn't necessarily mean 30 years of real estate history. I'm not saying that doesn't matter. Brian is amazing, for instance, and he's the broker for a reason. He can get through any type of situation. I do think that it's important to ensure that you're working with somebody that's actively in the market. Just because, like we talked about earlier, the market is ever changing. So if you're working with an agent that's worked for 30 years, but they haven't really done much in the last couple of years, then I would argue that I might have more experience in this new market than anybody else.
Nice. So experience isn't necessarily tied to time.
Correct.
It's almost transactions, to break it down to something simple. And how recently have you done it?
Correct. It's I think this is well summarized by, this is very much a what have you done for me lately type business. And with that, of course, it's just essentially is, what have you done for me lately? You know, is this something that you're actively in? Is this something that you're actively doing every day? Because it's constantly evolving and changing. So, you know, if you took 2 years off, you're coming back to something that's entirely separate from what it is now. So staying on top of the market and working with somebody that's within the market on a daily basis, in my opinion, is very important.
Nice. So kind of covers the main questions I wanted to go over. We're going to hit a quick lightning round.
Let's do it.
10 questions.
Okay.
I'm going to rifle them off and you give me the quick answer. TV shows or movie?
TV shows.
Summer or winter?
Summer, easy.
Nice. Tropical or city vacation?
Tropical.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla. Yeah.
Tough. Hamburger or hot dog?
Hot dog.
Best thing to dip fries in?
Ketchup.
Just ketchup?
Just ketchup.
Disappointing. Favorite sport to watch?
Hockey.
Favorite sport to play?
Hockey.
Nice. Car or truck?
Car.
And preferred social media?
I'm not very good at that one, but I'll say Instagram. Yeah.
Can people find you on social media?
They can, yeah. CJ_Johnson94 and Connor Johnson on Facebook. That is one thing that I need to get a little bit more active on. I don't think I've posted on Instagram since 2019, but
I'll send you the recording.
We're going to try to get a little bit better on that.
Yeah, we're going to post this on your accounts. So, well, thanks a lot for coming in.
Thanks
Anyone who wants to work with Connor, obviously he's a rock star. I love working with him. You can, he's on Livian, Vermont. You can reach him at 802-391-4224 or connorjohnson@livian.com or one of his very active social media accounts that he's just referenced.
I do check my messages on them.
It'll work. It'll
Perfect.
work.
Well,
thanks again for coming in. This is a blast. Anyone listening, tune in every week. Hopefully have more guests on. Any questions you want answered of upcoming guests, let me know. And see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.